Good morning, dear Parag Khannna, and thank you for taking part at the Diplomacy Festival of this year. So Parag Khannna is a leading global strategy advisor and a best-selling author. He is a founder and managing partner of Future Map, which is a data and scenario-based strategic advisory firm. And his newest book is The Future is Asian. We're pleased to listen to his talk about Asian diplomacy after the pandemic, unity or division. And in the meanwhile, we'll be collecting the questions coming from the students to ask Dr. Parag Khannna at the end of the lecture. The floor is yours, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I have, participated in various forms of the festival in the past. I'm very glad that you've been able to reconvene despite the present circumstances. I suppose it's the miracle of modern technology. But I do hope, of course, that in the future you will be able to reconvene in person in glorious Rome or elsewhere in Italy and Europe. So thank you again for inviting me to join you. And I think that since you are, of course, in Rome, one of the salient issues or episodes that really gives insight into the future of geopolitics and diplomacy and some of the trends emerging out of Asia begins in Italy. And it is what is currently happening with the port of Trieste. And in my Asia book, or for my research for that book about that was called The Future is Asian, I actually wrote about Trieste. Why would I do that? Well, of course, it's because the port has been planning on modernizing itself, was entertaining offers of investment, taking investment from Chinese companies. Chinese cruise ships were landing there. Italy decided to join the Belt and Road Initiative, in fact, about 2 years ago. And as you may remember, there was a lot of criticism when Italy joined the Belt and Road Initiative, especially from Germany, from France, from other countries who said that the European Union should have a common policy towards China and towards Belt and Road, and that China would get too much leverage over Italy in particular, but also would be carving up the EU in the way that it has been doing for some time. For example, through its 13+1 initiative with Eastern European and Balkan countries and so forth. But Italy said no, because of course, the irony of the German position was that Germany already trades so much with China. France already trades so much with China. And they have been maximizing the benefit of the overall European relationship with China and with Asia. And Italy has not been benefiting as much. So Italy was thinking commercially and said, let us join Belt and Road. Let us take more investment from China. So what happened last week? What happened was it was announced that the port of Hamburg decided to make a major investment in the port of Trieste and to edge out an offer from a Chinese bid to take a control of the port. And so, in fact, Europe is now supporting Europe. A European port has bought another European port. Now, what was interesting is that a couple of years ago, when all of this criticism was coming about, it seemed to me that one of the real reasons that Germany was opposing Italy joining Belt and Road is precisely because Trieste is closer to Munich than Hamburg is to Munich. And so the shipping companies that dominate the port of Hamburg and that represent a large amount of the container volume that comes into Germany were worried that Trieste would be taking over some of this business from Hamburg. And they were right. But after a couple of years of deliberation, they realized, well, rather than oppose the Italian, what Italy is doing, let's partner with Italy. Let's buy this Italian asset, and then jointly we can make Europe stronger. And I think that is a very good example of so many things about sort of modern diplomacy today. It is so commercial in nature. There are solutions in which you can turn the division that you think you are experiencing from China into more unity to potentially compete more with China. And you can be stronger in terms of setting rules together. And I think this really is win-win. Now, there is a joke in diplomacy today. It is that when China says win-win, it means that China wins twice. And that is sometimes the case. But I think that this episode and several others will prove the contrary. And I think that is a good thing for Europe. So let's talk about one of the other, and even really the biggest phenomenon that is at play in this episode, and that is Eurasia. Europe and Asia coming closer together physically, infrastructurally, through the volumes of trade. The European Union trades more with China and trades more with Asia than the United States does. A lot more. And that is why, if we go back 5 years to when China was launching the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, it was the United States that was opposing that bank, but European countries all joining it, almost all joining it, despite American opposition. Now, I grew up in a time of the transatlantic alliance, Europe, North America, and Europe, as the two twin pillars of Western civilization, the Western strategic community, the NATO alliance, the largest area of trade in the world. And almost none of those things are true anymore. What it tells you is a couple of things. Europe is thinking much more independently than it did in the past. It also sees that data that I just mentioned. $1.6 trillion of annual trade between Europe and Asia, which is much larger than the $1 trillion of annual trade that Europe has with the United States. And so Europe is making its decisions based on the desire to be an independent strategic player, based on its commercial prowess, its regulatory confidence, its social democratic welfare model, and of course, geography. You actually share this Eurasian landmass with China, with India, with Korea, with Southeast Asia, with Russia, with Iran, whereas the United States does not. And so you have a very different geographic psychology. And so what may be happening in the 21st century is that there is going to be this rebirth of the pre-colonial, pre-Cold War system. Asian system where Asia is coming closer together, but also rebirth, a renaissance of the Silk Roads between Europe and Asia. That does not mean that it will be without tension. There is a lot of friction today between Europe and China. There's a lot of uncertainty about how much one can trust Asian governments, including that of democratic India or democratic Philippines or Indonesia. These are poor and unstable countries to some degree. So there's a lot of bumps in the road ahead. And when it comes to matters of investment and human rights, of course, Europe and the United States both impose significant investment restrictions on Chinese capital and are starting to demand reciprocity and change and equal market access. So there are many areas where Europe and America still cooperate, but they often differ on how to achieve certain goals. The US has not joined these trade agreements with Asia, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Meanwhile, Europe has just passed a free trade agreement with Japan. It has one with Korea. It has just signed one with Vietnam as well. It has one with Singapore. It would like to have one with all of the countries of Southeast Asia and with India. Meanwhile, the United States is turning inward, more protectionist. I do think that North America as a continent is going to be a superpower for many decades to come. It is the most self-sufficient and stable continent in the whole world. But is it going to continue to have the kind of dominant influence over Europe and Asia individually, or Eurasia as a whole, that it had during the Cold War? The answer is no. And that's not a forward projection. That's already true today. And so Europeans are engaging in this new diplomacy and navigating their ties with Russia and Central Asian countries, the Caucasus, Turkey, India, China, and so forth, based on their own decision making. And I think that that's a very good thing. What it does tell us is that the structure of the world, geopolitically and therefore diplomatically, is already quite multipolar. You have the United States, you have the EU, you have China, you have India, you have Japan. So you have a multipolar world, and you also have a multipolar Asia within a multipolar world. And that's the reality of the world today. Again, that's not a prediction. That is right now. What I think we can predict is that that is actually a better system than a vertical, hierarchical, hegemonic world in which everyone depends on either the US as the sole superpower, you must follow US rules, you are for America or against America, or a Chinese-centric world, which some people think is the alternative. My view is that neither will be the case. Instead, we are in this world already that is truly multipolar, and it will be led neither by America nor by China. And that, I think, is a better outcome. It is a network structure to geopolitics. And we have not seen a structure like that in many centuries, where every region, where every continent is simultaneously important and can have free relations with each other, strategic, economic, commercial, cultural, without any get in the way and to stop those ties. Whether it's African relations with China, Chinese relations with Europe, South American relations with Southeast Asia, all of these relationships are actually flourishing and revitalizing. New complementarities are being discovered. And that is fundamentally what globalization is all about. And geopolitics and diplomacy are the competition and cooperation that takes place within, and that also shapes this global network structure, this matrix, if you will, this diplomatic matrix that we are now in. So for all of you that are growing up now, that are entering the professional world, that are considering your careers in diplomacy, it isn't just about what governments do. It's what companies do, what ports do, what cities and mayors do. There are so many active roles and agendas in this marketplace of the future of diplomacy. It isn't just empires and states, it's regions and provinces and cities and companies and civil society all at the same time. That's what makes the world today so complex. It's also what makes the world so exciting. And that's why I'm delighted to be able to share some of these thoughts and ideas with you. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. So I will ask the first question. It says that, as you have mentioned in one of the latest articles, Asia requires its own version of prevalent Western paradigm known as democratic peace theory, not waging war against each other, or technocratic peace theory. How conceivable does it seem for the current moment?
Well, there's contending theories for sure, and I think we need to assess the reality on the ground. In the last 30 years, major Asian powers have not fought major conflict with each other, even though the potential has been there, very strong potential. Taiwan, North Korea, India and Pakistan, India and China, South China Sea. All of these are still very live and hostile situations. But so far, for 30 years, Asian powers have been very pragmatic. They've been very technocratic. They have separated their economic interdependence and complementarity from their geopolitical tensions and rivalries. That is not going to last forever. My view of technocratic peace is that at a time of strength, when China is strong, India is strong, Japan is strong, they should actually seize the moment to solve their outstanding disputes, because when all powers are strong, one power cannot defeat all the others, right? And that is what I'm hoping that Chinese can be convinced of, and that we can have a technocratic, diplomatic, peacemaking process. Right now, it's clear that that is not happening at the moment. But I do think it is actually the best hope to keep Asia stable, because we cannot count on just luck to prevent conflict. If you look at the Caucasus right now between Armenia and Azerbaijan, in Nagorno-Karabakh. Now you have the shelling on both sides that is damaging the cities in Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is what people have called a frozen conflict. Now, I have been traveling to that region and across the Asian hotspots for almost 20 years, and I've always found that one of the most dangerous terms is frozen conflict. We pretend that it's dormant, we don't have to worry about it, there's no reason for it to flare up. But these frozen conflicts are never frozen. They're always simmering and thawing, and they could explode. And the same is true of Cyprus and other places in Europe, and it's true of many places in Asia. So I do actively advocate that we not think about solving these problems as a matter of after the next election here, or if a different leader comes in there. We can create a parallel process in which the country, the nation, is bound towards a settlement of these outstanding disputes. Otherwise, our luck will run out.
Thanks a lot for the response. And as we have the time limit, I'll be asking the last question. In countries such as Indonesia, the Philippines, also Myanmar, due to the weakness of the government response exposed by COVID-19, the military and security forces gained prominence, and violent clashes are observed. Do you think that it will lead to overthrow of the government that can affect the diplomatic relationship with other Asian countries?
It's a very good question, but remember that these are countries where the military has already been quite powerful. Let's remember, Myanmar is a military-run country. In Indonesia, the military is quite allied with the politics. And if we see the instability in the streets right now, it has a lot to do with economic issues in the country. So I don't think that, though, given that the military and the governments are very tight, I don't think that we will see an overthrow. I think that actually in a number of Southeast Asian countries, despite their poverty, they have committed enormous public resources to try to compensate for the very negative economic impacts of COVID. Could they have done better? Of course, but these are poor countries. It is harder to impose a certain discipline. The lockdown does have very significant costs for food security, health security, education, welfare. So these are very challenging times in those countries. Italy itself and other European countries have been and continue to be very stressed and challenged by COVID. That's been such an unpredictable pandemic. So imagine how much harder it is when a population is 100 million people or 200 million people with extensive poverty, and it's very difficult to trace the spread of the virus and so forth. So I know that there is a lot of frustration in these countries, but it's been there for quite some time. I don't think that toppling those governments right now is going to be the solution.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for attending and taking part for your lecture. It was really productive, and I enjoyed it a lot. I hope all the students are going to enjoy this. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.